Shawn and his wife Kristy own Dry Creek Ranch over in Dakota, and so they specialize in soil health, direct market, pasteurized meat, and community education. So here today he's going to talk about cover crops and how you can apply them to your own situation.
Yep, so thanks Laura. So Dry Creek Farm and Ranch, it's just east of Rapid, which is about 12 miles east of Rapid. It's Dakota, so that's kind of what our place looks like. It's pretty diverse. We have Rapid Creek flows through our place where we're able to irrigate. This is my family, Kristy, as we mentioned, and the two girls, Riley and Ryan, totally different kids. You could lay Riley down and have her take a nap, and Ryan she'd never take a nap. So I always ask Kristy, is that resisting arrest? So we have 3 different places. They're all about the same size, but they range from 35 miles to 70 miles from home. So we try to run our livestock on all 3 places, but we try to let one rest for a year. So we'll use 2, let one rest. It's kind of our plan. And since we've changed kind of our management scheme, we can calve anywhere. We can calve 70 miles from home, and it still works out okay. But for most of the stuff we're going to see, it'll be at our headquarters at Dakota. So this is kind of what it looks like at Dakota there from the air. Old drone shot on a good year. The last time it rained, I think. And this is kind of what our topography of inning looks like. It's a little bit more open and rolling and a lot more wind, but still pretty good ground. So it seems like one area might be getting rain and the other one doesn't. So it seems like it works out for us pretty good. So kind of our goals is we kind of changed everything we've done since like 2015. We were very conventional, did lots of tillage, did lots of, we had feedlot set up, did everything our neighbors were doing, and we just tried to do it, bigger and better. And then, I don't know, about 2015, 2016, we started learning more and more about soil health and different things, and that kind of leads you into looking at what you're doing, and then it gives you the opportunity to stop and look at what other things are doing. So I would call that more holistic approach. So we look at things and wonder why that's happening. Like maybe we might have a weed. Why did that weed grow there? We don't really focus on getting rid of the weed. We want to know why it's there, because we know that it'll eventually be grass, and that's what we're after. So, so anyway, our goals are always kind of a holistic focus, but regenerative has to be regenerative. We always want to be building something. We're trying to build soil. Our motto is regenerating land, revitalizing lives. So we're trying to build community, education, and we're just trying to grow life. Life builds life. So has to be multi-generational. So we want our kids to take over. A lot of our places seem like they're shrinking. It's hard to get kids to come in. So we've tried to stack enterprises, and that's in our diversified. We mentioned educational, has to be profitable. So a lot of times you hear ranchers say, oh, well, it's just a really good way of life. I'm not in it for the money. But we're not in it for the money, but it has to be profitable, because if it's not, there's no way we can bring that other generation in. So, and quality of life, that's changed for us tremendously over the years. You don't realize how hard you work and in the business, how hard you work at just everyday tasks until you step out, and then you realize, like everybody else has the weekends off. They have a day job, so they have the weekends off. But so we focus really hard on a quality of life. So I'm just gonna kind of go through the journey of how we got started in this cover crop deal, and what it's kind of turned into now, and what we're kind of shooting for now, and what we've seen over the years. So if you guys have questions, this is going to be a pretty short deal, so if you guys have questions, just go ahead and stop me. So this is kind of how we started. This is a winter triticale. It's a biennial, so we plant it in the fall, and normally we would hay this or silage it and feed it back to our cows. And this particular year we were super dry, had way too many cows probably, and so we were forced with either having to sell those cows or figure out a different feed source for them. So we decided to graze the winter triticale instead of haying it, hoping that we'd get some moisture and that we'd be able to hold on to them. So that's what we did. We just took some poly wire and split this thing up into paddocks, and then we turned, I think we had about 200 yearling heifers we put on that. And one of the things we learned, I showed this to Jay Fuhr, and he said, well, you didn't have enough cattle, because the triticale will get ahead of you and it heads out, and then they don't want to eat it. But it still has a use. And when we talked about biomass and soil health earlier, and keeping that soil covered, it still has a use. So I just went out there with my tractor, and these yearlings followed me around, and we trampled the triticale in, just mashed it right in the ground. So that allowed me to get a real diverse warm season cover crop mix and no-till it into that, right into the triticale with no herbicide or anything. The livestock terminated the plant. And then, and this was, nobody else was doing this. You know, cover crops were unheard of at the time. So finding seed and finding information about it was extremely hard. So, what's that?
When was that?
This would have been 2016. Yep. So, working through the seed dealer, you know, I said, this is what I know I can get off of this ground if I hay it. I need to have this much forage. The plan was to graze this through the winter. And I said, I need to have this much forage. So he said, I think we can do it. So we planted it. And you can see it did pretty good with sunflowers and sorghum. And there's 15 different species, I think, in there. But it was pretty incredible to watch it go. And so then that drives you to looking at, well, the soil health stuff is pretty cool. Let's keep looking at it. So I was always in the house researching soil health stuff, and I came across this slide, and I don't really pay attention too much what it says, other than, you know, 25 earthworms per square foot equals 1 ton of earthworms an acre. Well, 1 ton of earthworms an acre is 100 tons of casting. If you think about that as composting or nitrogen, that's a big deal. But the one that really stuck out to me was it's equivalent to 4,000 feet of 6-inch drain tile. And if any of you have ever seen drain tile, especially East River, you see drain tile and the water that's coming out of that, it's tremendous. And so that was pretty cool. So I said, well, let's go see if we got any earthworms. We didn't even know. We had just started no-tilling. We didn't even know if we had earthworms. And so Kristy and I went out there, and Riley, I think, was with us, and he kind of pulled back the canopy, and there's, lo and behold, there's a worm right there coming out, coming to feed. And so I got so excited about just seeing the worm, I forgot to count the castings. That's why I was there, was to count the worm castings. But you can see how much litter is on the ground. You don't see any bare soil there. And so that was one of the things we were going for. And you know, this is kind of an old slideshow for me. I kind of made it just so I could go around my neighborhood, because nobody understood cover crops. Nobody understood what I was doing and why I wasn't haying it. So I said, well, just made this slideshow, and I said, well, this is what it looks like, guys. So it's, you know, cows eat those turnips, cows eat those radishes. That sorghum stays about 11% protein through the winter, and that's really all you need. It actually does, they do very well on it. This is kind of January, so right before we turned them out, turn the cows out, this is kind of what it looks like. And again, I'm just trying to show you step by step on what to expect, especially if you have livestock and thinking about grazing, you know, a warm season or a cool season cover crop. So like I said, this is January, and they're still green down there. This is kale or collards or some sort of brassica there, but it's froze several times. And go ahead.
Where are you? Where's this at?
Caputa.
Oh, here in South Dakota.
Yeah. Yep. So those things stay green for a long time, and cows love them. This is just kind of a chunk of soil I dug up just looking for macropores, and sure enough, I've got them. You can see those holes in there. That's all worm holes and different macropores and root holes. And you think about that, when you dump some water on that, where's it going to go? Well, if you've got macropores like that with healthy soil, you get to keep that water. So this is the day we turned them out. And again, this is just kind of a reference so you can understand how much biomass is there. And then you just observe and see what the cows eat. They love those sunflowers. Those are kind of the first things. They take a bite of sunflowers. And, you know, so I went from one management level where we just fed all the time. You know, I spend 6 hours a day loading feed wagons and taking feed out to cattle. And then I switched to this, where the cattle are grazing. And it was hard for me to get over that hump, because in my mind, the cattle should be behind a windbreak, staying warm, and I'm feeding them. Well, this is February 25th. I think the wind was blowing. It was similar to yesterday. It was super cold. And I was actually going to the stock show, and I stopped, and these cows are out grazing. I thought, man, I must be starving them. They should be humped up behind the shed. So I went out and looked, and I mean, you can tell when an animal's doing well or not, and it just blew me away. They're fine. You know, that's what they're meant to do. They're meant to graze, move around, and do what cattle do. So this is kind of what I look for now. So we chop up those cover crops into paddocks. And usually about 3-day moves. We'll put cattle in there for about 3 days. And the reason we do that is so that we know they're always going to have the same. It's just like feeding them out of a ration, out of a feed wagon. We know that they're going to have, you know, those green collards. They're going to have some sorghum. They're not going to go through and just pick all the candy first and then eat the other stuff last. So about every 3 days we'll move them. And this is what I look for when we're moving fence. I'll go find a cow pie, and I want that nice and round with a little dimple in it. And if it's doing that, I know that they're getting the right nutrition. If it starts stacking up, we're lacking something, and it's probably protein, so then I'll supplement with a bale alfalfa. But
how many pounds of beef per acre, and how many days are you running it on that strip?
So I always figure about 80 cow days an acre. So I could put 80 cows on an acre for a day.
Okay.
And with that, I'm leaving probably half, because I want my soil covered in the spring.
Yeah.
So we're leaving a ton. We're leaving a lot.
You do that once, you don't go back and rotate the second time through?
Not if sometimes we'll get a snow or something and I'll have to go back.
Yeah.
But it's usually March,
Yeah.
somewhere in there. But you can see here, you know, you're trying to figure out how do we know the cow's getting enough nutrients. And so we take some fecal samples and send it into Texas A&M, and this is what we come back with. And it tells you all the nutrients in there, but we were looking for 1/3 of a pound to gain a day, and we're getting a pound and, you know, just about 1 1/3 pounds a gain. So the cows are getting fat on this cover crop. So they're doing very well.
What'd you do for water?
So that's irrigated out of Rapid Creek, that cover crop.
Well,
Oh, for the cows?
yeah.
They can get to different water sources.
You
We
got
got springs and,
Asian water there?
yep.
Stay open water?
You know, they can get to Rapid Creek, or we have a well that they can get out of, or we have springs all the way around it. But so kind of what this taught me is it gave me independence. So we figured out that we can graze this stuff and not have to put up hay every year. So we sold our haying equipment. So this doesn't happen to us ever, because we don't have anything left. We've got 2 tractors left, and one's for sale. No haying equipment, no rakes, nothing. The fuel guy stopped one day and he said, "Where are you getting your fuel?" Because he was pretty sure that I went somewhere else. Well, I just don't use it anymore. The cows are doing it. So where do we go from here? Okay, so now we're planting a warm season cover crop after a biennial. So now what? Now I've got this chunk of ground, you know, the next year that I don't have my winter biennial in. So now I have to go with the spring mix. So that's where your oats and clovers and stuff like that come in, and you plant those, you know, we try to plant them early so we don't have to terminate anything, so we don't have to use herbicide. You plant them early enough, a lot of times the oats will be up and take care of your weed problem before you ever, you know, before they get up. So, and then usually our goal is to graze it. I think I've got some on this slide. Yeah, so this was my first year of the cool season cover crop, and the plan was to graze it. So I built the mix to graze it. It's got lots of brassicas, lots of turnips and radishes and different things in it, but it's oats and triticale and I think a little rye maybe in there.
Doesn't have the legumes.
Oh, I think there might have been some clover in this one. I'm not for sure, but it was dry and we were behind with hay and stuff, so we thought, well, let's hay this. So I had them come out and spray, because I've tried to hay brassicas before, and they don't dry down. You cut them and they just lay there like a can of spinach. They just don't dry down. So we sprayed them hoping that we dry everything down. And then we started getting rain. So drought is over officially at this point. We got 8 inches of rain that week, which is, we don't get that at Caputa. It's the Caputa triangle. We do not get 8 inches of rain in a week. You might get some hail, but so then I got to thinking, this is irrigated ground. It's been irrigated since 1890, I think, is when they put the ditch in, and it's always just been taken. So they went in and hayed and they take it. They went in and hay and take it. So they take that carbon off year in and year out since 1890, basically. And I thought, well, let's see what happens. Let's see if we can just leave this biomass here. Let's not hay it. Let's leave it here. And I just drilled right into it. So I got a no-till drill. It was still pretty wet, but it was the driest we could get it, I guess. But we planted another warm season cover crop mix into this after we terminated it. And a lot of people say you can't do that. You can't. There's too much biomass there. You're never going to get anything to come through. But it comes through great. It's fine. And now I've got to mulch, and I've got to start on my whole system. So when we're talking about no-till, it isn't that you just no-tilled, this year, this time, where it's been tilled and tilled and tilled in the past. Now I'm starting to build a base. I'm building a foundation. I know that I've got these oats there, so they're going into my soil, and now the system is starting to go. So this would be the warm season cover crop. I think this is September. And again, this is just my winter forage plan. So one of the things that really bothers me about this system is I know the soil health principles. I know that I need diversity, which I have, but I need a living root as long as I can. And I don't get that with this because it goes dormant in October, November. I have those brassicas kind of working in there still, but I don't have a plant capturing sunlight. So I thought, well, those corn guys back east, they fly rye on all the time. Let's try that. So we did. We hired this guy, and he came out and flew the rye on for us. And we might have done it a little bit early, but really ticked off my neighbors. They called the sheriff on me because the plane would dive bomb their house and then pull up, and it was pretty comical to watch. But
when was it seeded?
pardon me?
When was it seeded?
So this was, I think, September 9th, somewhere in there. It was probably a smidge earlier than I should have. But we got some rye to come up, and there it is, germinated. It's below that canopy. But then we had another little strip that we no-till planted too. So this is the no-till stuff, not the flowing on stuff. But we got a roller crimper and decided we were going to get in the pumpkin business. So pumpkins. Yep, in western South Dakota, yeah. So we got this crimper, rolled the rye down. It works slick. It works slick. So now we've got those oats down there from the year before, and now we've got rye on top of it. So we're just building. We're putting all that carbon back that's been taken off for years and years and years. And you can see a dandelion there, but for the most part, that works as a really good mulch. Rye, we talked about the allelopathic effect in the other room earlier. Rye's got a allelopathic effect and has a tendency to suppress other plants and weeds and that sort of thing. It's kind of a, I don't know, you're not supposed to use it West River very much. It's kind of a noxious weed back here, but.
Didn't look like that had any negative effect on the pumpkin.
No, the pumpkins did good. We didn't, so this is a year we had good rain. We didn't irrigate or anything. The pumpkins did really good. And there's so now we use that cover crop and we cut a maize into it. So we sell pumpkins, we have a cover crop maize, and we talked about the educational part of this. Since Storm Atlas, Kristy and I have had just a real draw to try to educate our community of where their food comes from. And it's hard to get people, they're kind of scared of ranchers. It's hard to get them to come out. But if you have pumpkins for sale or a cover crop maize, they'll come out, and then we can put them on a hay wagon and drive around the ranch and tell them, this is why we do this here, this is how this works. And they're starting to slowly come around on, where their food comes from.
You and Dwayne.
What's that? Yeah. So that's kind of this is our very first one. That's by far been our best one. But it is cool. It's cool to see people's reaction. And you get to talk, get to talk to those kids. So like I said, we kind of use it for, we kind of lure them there, and then we start talking soil health. And we start talking about water infiltration and nutrient density and where your food comes from, and know your farmer. That's super important to us, that you know where your food comes from. Let's see, learning to leave what we take. So like I said, we used to hay, and I used to hunt coyotes like crazy. I was really good at it. So if you combine those two and you see a coyote jumping on your windrows, you have a tendency to chase him down with your baler and try to get him caught. That's not true. I don't know where that picture come from, but I would have probably tried to do that if I had a chance. So like I said, we're trying to leave everything there. So this is some irrigated alfalfa. This would be fourth crop alfalfa. And we decided to try to graze it instead of haying it. So we turned our weaned calves on it, and what we did was we give them just a little sliver of it after the frost comes off in the morning. So after 11 o'clock, usually in the morning, and then we give them a little sliver, and then they're allowed to go back to pasture, so that we didn't have any bloat issues that way. And a lot of people said, you better not do that. Your alfalfa is going to get compacted, and it's not going to do worth a darn. But this is what it looked like the next year. You need sometimes you just need that disturbance to get these plants thinking and get the biology stimulated again. We try to use electric fence, and we're always trying to prove the ground. So this is a solid crested wheat field, and I'm still struggling with it. I haven't figured out how to get it fixed, but I don't know if you just work with it. You work with whatever Mother Nature gives you. You just kind of work with it and ask, why is it there, and if you can try to change it. But so we try to move, like I said, usually no more than every 3 days, but sometimes as much as 4 times a day we'll move livestock, and we're trying to mimic basically what the bison did. So they're moving across all the time. They're dropping dung and urine behind them. That's foul. That stinks now. They don't want to be there, so they keep moving forward. If you keep that fence there, and let's say it's a larger pasture, and they're not allowed to move forward, they're going to go and take another bite of grass that doesn't stink. So they got a churd here and a bite of grass here. They're going to take that over and over again, and pretty soon you have overgrazing. And so that's what we try to avoid. And we just try to mimic, Mother Nature and what she did with the bison and the deer and the elk and all that stuff. So this is that's another cover crop. That's kind of just another, kind of what it looks like when we graze it. And there's kind of a mix. And it's never the same. We're always changing it up. And you can plant all this stuff, and one year you might get a whole bunch of sorghum, and the next year it's clover. But you got to look and say, okay, why? Why is that happening? We don't use any fertilizers. We use herbicide, but that's what we're trying to get out of. So, like this year, we couldn't hardly grow sorghum, but we grew clover, like this tall. Why was that ground wanting to do that? It's wanting a legume.
Just like your prairie grass. I mean, every year there's a different
Something different.
dominator in there.
Yeah. Why is it doing that? So we ask why a lot. So, we're focused on soil health. We're focused on feeding our community. And I just feel like the cover crops are a good tool to get there. But to me, grass and sod is a far better way, a far quicker way to grow soil. And so we've been planting our irrigated ground back to grass. And then that's where we'll move them 4 times a day and try to get across that. And so this is kind of a mix of the first batch of grass that we planted. We planted a lot of native stuff, a lot of flowers and forbs, and hopefully we have pollinators there, because we realize the whole thing is an ecosystem. The whole thing has to work. If you take one thing out, something collapses. So.
Do you have any honeybees?
Oh yeah, they got honeybees. Yep.
Your own bees or somebody?
Nope, there's somebody else's. Yep.
Got a lot of followers
Yep. So if we do have to feed, what do we do? So here's some I've got a pasture I call my bad ground. It's got bare soil all over it. It never produces much feed. So what we tried doing anyway, is we'll put some bales out there like that. Just set them 30 to 50 feet apart. and then let those cows kind of attack them and let them stomp it in and get the dung and urine there, and they're able to cover that soil up then. Now we have mulch, and we also have our manure and urine, and we've had some hoof impact too. So we're causing that disturbance that we're looking for. So there it is, kind of chewed up, and then we'll move them on to the next batch of bales. But you can see it's real covered, and we've got lots of manure there. So this is what it looked like the next year in July. And if you don't do it right, you'll have some of these spots where you've got too much nutrients there, too much mulch, too much, I don't like to call it anything but mulch or armor, but you might have too much and you don't necessarily get grass, but you do get to soak in the water. So as long as it's covered, water's still infiltrating.
What is that grass?
What?
What is that grass?
That is western wheatgrass. Yep.
Are you selective with what your bales are as far as species composition of your bales?
Sometimes. I really like to use, for bale grazing, I love to use like a cereal grain, like, winter wheat or oats or something like that, because you'll get that stomped in, and the next spring that'll green up. So now you've got a living root, and it's really not going to go anywhere. I mean, it's just going to, it'll grow, you've got green, so you're capturing sunlight, you've got the soil covered, and it usually kind of goes away in a year. But yeah, probably don't want to go out to a native prairie and drop a bale of crested wheat or brome or something like that out there. So yeah, we are careful where we put what.
Have you ever used winter field peas?
I've planted some, never used the winter field peas. Cow peas, we plant lots of times in our cover crops, we'll plant cow peas.
Yeah, so now they're pretty winter with the winter rye or the winter wheat or something.
Yep.
Brings a legume into it.
Yeah. So yeah, so we're kind of learning on the bale grazing deal, but like I said, this is kind of some older stuff that we're just I'm just taking you through how we got started, and just in case you're interested in getting started. But yeah, we're just kind of learning as we go, just like everybody. So there's a formula. If you think about, you see the weeds there in the background, there's a formula. You think about how much protein your hay has and convert that into nitrogen. So if you've got real high protein hay and you're dropping that high nitrogen there, you're going to have a little too much, and that's where your weed pressure is coming from. So spreading those bales out, or maybe rolling them out, that might help solve some of that. Here's the ground right next to it. Like I said, it's still bare, still cracking, but the bale grazing stuff's still in pretty good shape. So the big question is it working? Is it working on our ranch? What have we seen that's changed? We definitely have pollinators showed up. Dung beetles showed up. Tance was out. We definitely have these. Alan,
I was not out for that.
yeah. Tance was out and did some infiltration stuff, and we have increased our infiltration. I think the first inch was 11 seconds, and the second inch was like 28 seconds, where before it was, 5 minutes and you'd finally get mad and leave type deal. I think Alan Williams said if you start to see the bugs and the birds and the wildlife come back, you're starting to regenerate. And that's what we're seeing here. Last winter we had 300 deer on a 160-acre deal. We had turkeys, we had grouse, coyotes, I don't know what else. Yeah, I mean, it was just like you drive down our driveway where most of this stuff is, and it was just a mecca. It was a beautiful thing. Things to consider. So this is kind of the first hoorah on this field where we've been tilling and tilling for years, and we couldn't get that cover crop to take. And right next to it's millet, which anybody can grow that. We mentioned that earlier. It's kind of a weed, and we found that too. But until you get that system kind of rolling with no-till, you kind of got to roll with the punches a little bit. But if you can start with something with lots of carbon. I love winter annuals. I love winter triticale, winter wheat, or something like that. Then you can get that system kind of going.
Before you started, what was your primary crop on those? Was it grain or hay?
It was hay. So yeah, it was hay. everything we do is for forage, so
Primarily alfalfa?
alfalfa and grass, orchard grass and brome grass, and, yep. This is kind of when everybody heard about cover crops, so we all thought, cover crops, that's turnips and radishes. So I went out and planted, I actually had triticale in here too, but turnips and radishes. And what you find out is your cows get really loose, but it's also a carbon consumer. So if you have a decent mulch there and then you plant just nothing but turnips and radishes, it will consume all of that carbon by spring, and you'll have bare soil. So it's important to get that carbon to nitrogen ratio kind of balanced out so that you don't lose your cover. It's so important to keep your soil covered. I mentioned holistic. So this is a marsh elder weed, and Kristy's holding on to this. We just pulled it out of the ground. But I asked, well, why is that weed there? What's it doing? And you pull it out of the ground and you see how straight that root is. There's no zing and zag. That thing went straight down. So I know that I've got, we don't have any compaction in that area. We know that things are starting to work right for us right there. Yeah, it's a weed. I could have, sprayed it or got upset about it, but it's amazing when you can see it on fence lines. Well, why is that grass growing here? Or why is that weed growing on this side of the fence but not on this side of the fence? It's all management. Mother Nature knows how to balance it out, so we just try to work with that. So a lot of us, especially farmers, we look at this crop and we're intent on, growing the most. We talked about peppers in the last room. Those peppers should have been bigger. We should have got more peppers. And but sometimes I wonder if we should have. Maybe it's not the pepper we should be looking at. Maybe it's something else for a while. If we think about our kids and how they're going to take this over the next generation, we're going to need something there solid. We need some roots. So how much do we really need? Sometimes we ask that. Do we really need a bumper crop of peppers? I don't know. So anyway, I like to point that out. But Franklin Roosevelt said, a nation that destroys its soils destroys itself. And we've watched it erode away little bit by little bit here. But there it's clearly evident that they farmed it completely away. There's nothing there. They had to, it was obviously booming at one point, and they're gone now. And so nothing but rock left. Sometimes we just need to quit digging. That's not mine. It might be. I lent it to my neighbor. But it's not about how much we can take from the land. It's about how much we get from the land without taking anything. So we try to keep everything there. So that's why we use livestock. We raise grass-finished beef, pasture pork, and grass-fed lamb. So we're trying to use all those different livestock tools to kind of harvest and whatever the land gives us, we harvest with livestock if we can.
You're growing corn?
No corn.
So you don't finish that grass with any grain?
Nope. No. Takes a little longer. It's taken a little bit to get our animals the right size to kind of adapt to what we do. My old animals that I would call my conventional animals did not fit the bill. So we would turn them out, and it took 4 years to get a grass fat. And we kind of experimented with, I don't know, a dozen of them, and it took 4 years to get a big fat, We could have probably processed them earlier, but I still think that the fat is where the health is. So we want our animals to still have a layer of fat on them, be well marbled, so that our consumer is getting, if we're going to go through all this work to get our soil right, and we're going to have the healthy soil, now we got healthy plants, the livestock's going to eat that, and then us. Yeah, we have healthy people. So it's important for us that they get the healthy fat. That's what we're trying to do, is build healthy, regenerate people, regenerate land.
Did you have to change breeds or just breed for what you were doing?
Kind of change breeds. So we were just traditional Angus, and we were buying bulls that would give us, the biggest calf in the fall, and then our cows got big. We had 16 to 1,800 pound cows, and so we actually looked around and We did buy like an Aberdeen cross bull, so kind of the low line bull, and then put him on those cows, and then that dropped him down pretty good. But now we're just testing Murray Grey. Murray Grey, it's a white Angus. Yep, so it's, when we're moving those cows 4 times a day in the summer, we noticed that they were getting hot. So black cows get hot, and they bug out and go stand under a shade tree or stand by the water tank. And so I started kind of researching more heat tolerant cattle. And you think of heat tolerant, you think more of a Brahman influenced cow with big ears, lots of skin, and they don't do well up here, and especially at the sale barn. Hard to sell. So anyway, somehow I stumbled on Murray Greys, and there's not very many of them in the United States. They're really hard to find. The Breed Association said they might register 500 of them this year, but they are actually a shorthorn cow and an Aberdeen Angus bull in 1904, I think, 1905. They got the silver calf, and the same cow kept having a silver calf. 12 different calf crops had the silver calf, and they started breeding them. They're beautiful. And so they have a black hide, but basically everything else is the same. They're still a smaller frame, just like the Angus used to be. Cavities and docility, one of the things we like to do is have tours. So we'd like to be able to, when we're moving, you know, those cows 4 times a day, I'd like to have people be able to come out and watch that, or and see the trampling and see what's going on there. Murray Greys are docile, so we're testing that a little bit. We'll see where it goes. And they also have the most tenderness genes of any breed. So when we're selling grass-fed beef, that's something we're looking for. So there's my contact. We love having people out. We'll come to your place and visit too. I'm a director on the South Dakota Soil Health Coalition Board, so that's one of the things we do is outreach. And, you know, all we're trying to do is plant the seed. Nothing I'm doing is right. I don't think it's not for everybody, but if I can plant the seed and you can take a little bit from it, and you know, hopefully there's going to be some young people that really make a difference with soil health. And think about the carbon sequestration and all that. It's really exciting times when people are learning. Talking about healthy food, beer.
What's your stocking rates? How have they transitioned to this?
So we definitely have less cattle because we're trying to manage our grass to graze year long. Where before we had several lease pastures, and we bring everything home, and we had to feed the feed. So we're less stocking, but we also stock with the rain. So if we don't have the rain, we'll just destock. I don't know. It's probably, I wouldn't say it's probably the same as it was. You can't really say that it's. It's just before I would lease a bunch of ground. Now we don't have any leases other than the Forest Service lease that we've always had. But yeah, stocking rates, it's the same, but it's not. So you got to manage your grass. You can graze year round, and then use those cover crops too.
Do you mob graze pretty much year round into, or do you still kind of traditionally chicken out the summer?
No, we try to mob graze or rotational graze at least in the summer. This year a little tougher at that inning place is 70 miles away, and $5.30 a gallon for fuel, and $140, you know, about every 10 days. So kind of backed off on that, but we still try to rest at something, and we're struggling to get enough rain to really see the benefits of the fruits.
So Shawn, you mentioned when you first started the presentation here, and I know something we struggle with is it boils down to profitability. And so as you've implemented this stuff, have you seen your profitability increase? Without getting into specific numbers, but.
So I had all these inputs before, and those are gone. So now I got a tax problem. So that changes. And the other thing is we're investing, this is, you know, a lot of people say, well, these soil tests. Yeah, I soil test, but like every other year. And I just fit the test and I put it in the file. Because to me, that's 401k. So I really don't care what it's doing. I'm kind of interested, but not really. I want to see 15 years from now when I pull the file out and I go, oh, I started with $500 and now I have, you know, 150,000. And that's where the soil will be. I started with 2% organic matter and now I'm at 6. And that's kind of what I do. But the profitability, I think we've got more equity in the soil now than we did. And, you know, you can look at that either way. You can say, you know, that he doesn't have any money, or if it's, say a bank wants to loan you some money, but I can go out on my healthy soil and say, well, I can grow this without fertilizer, I can shut my pivot off on a lot of it because I stored all that water. So a lot of it's in the soil, and it's hard to get that number out of it.
It is, yeah.
But you can feel it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's worth it. It's worth it. You can feel the change.
Have you thought about getting more diversity with your livestock breeds? I mean, as far as have you thought about adding sheep or goats or pigs or something in there that would?
Yep. So I mentioned we sell grass-fed beef, grass-fed lamb, and pasture pork. So we have a few pigs, a handful of sheep, and I didn't think I'd like the sheep, but it's funny because both my kids, my youngest would have did really well with pigs earlier, and pigs are around here, we're not going to have any of that. And my oldest daughter, she always wanted sheep. And I'm like, sheep here? Well, you get down this soil health road and you learn that, you know, that's part of the ecosystem, there's diversity above and below ground. And so, yeah, now we have sheep, and I enjoy them.
How do you graze them as far as timing goes with your cattle?
So we don't have a big enough lot yet so we're trying to get those Murray grays that we just bought, we're trying to get those and the sheep to hook on, and then we'll move them as a group, except for when we do that ultra high stock density stuff. So that, when we're moving cattle like 4 times a day, that'll probably be more yearlings, something without a calf.
What type of pigs do you have?
Red wattles, and this year we'll buy red wattles. We usually just go buy feeder pigs from somebody and then raise them.
Have you looked into tuning goats?
A little bit. They don't look like a person, they freak me out.
I don't run up as much.
Yeah.
How do you
keep the
incorporate
pigs moving.
breeding those?
What's that?
How do you incorporate the pasture pigs?
So the pasture pigs, we start them in an enclosure, put electric fencing on the bottom of it. We get them used to that string, and then we immediately move them. We start moving them. We have portable water that goes with them, and we try to find places that. It's been interesting to see. I didn't know anything about pigs when we first started, so we just wanted to be in the shade. So we ran along the creek, kind of in the cottonwood trees, and the year before that we had lots of flooding, so we had all these sticks and branches and everything. They ripped them up, spread them out. Well, now the biology can get a hold of that stuff and start decomposing it. So that was kind of cool. But then in one of our feedlots, we started them as just a wheat patch. Always had been a wheat patch. Never seen anything else grow. They're buckwheats. We put the pigs there. And then it was last year, we had 6 inches of rain all summer. Moved those pigs, and I had grass like this tall growing there. And what? No, it was grass. And I didn't notice until we were doing in the fall. We were doing hay-rides by there. Like, why do I have this big, thick, lush grass just in this spot? Well, everywhere we took the pigs, we had that grass. So that is another disturbance. And we talked about the hoof action, and those pigs are disturbing, and plus they're different biology, something different there. And they are delicious. I don't never had pasture pork. It's a whole different ballgame. So yeah, now we just try to go those weed spots. Like I said before, we had lots of little feedlots set up in our place, and that's what it had always been before we got there, and that's how we ran it for a long time. So we did nothing but kosher. Take the pigs in there, and you start to see. This year we tried to plant cover crops behind them, just broadcast the day before we moved them. Let the pigs kind of rut it up and plant that seed for us, and that kind of worked. But I didn't see grass come back in those spots. Where the other spots where I didn't do that, I got grass. So I'm after the grass. Good questions.
Really isn't any other disturbance like corroding pig.
Yeah. And we don't necessarily let them rut much. You find that they'll go to the bad spots. If you have weeds or thistle or something like that, that's where they'll rut. but we don't let them work very much and then we move it. As soon as they start rutting, it's time to go somewhere else. We do have, I don't know what kind of pigs, well, Kristy picked up a couple of pretty miniature pot-bellied, they're just like the coon coons, they're creepy to look at. They just look like a person.
They're dogs,
Yeah.
dogs.
So, our garden is a no-till garden, we always try to keep it covered with mulch and stuff, but we put the pigs in there this year just to see what happens. So they're in there, it's all covered with straw, but the pigs are written up in there. If we missed a potato here or there, whatever, pigs are in there. So we'll probably have to see how that goes next year if we plan.
So if you go back to 16, is that when you said you started? 2016?
Yep, we put tillage in 15.
To now, if you were to compare the organic matter in the soil back then and now, and where the carbon level has changed in terms of the asset of the land, that's
Right, that's a big deal right now.
that's huge. Not just sustainable, but regenerative.
Right.
There's a difference.
Yep, and
You're into the regenerative.
it's definitely building soil, and that's what we set out to do. You know, as soon as I got into this, you start looking at gate ground and what they're doing, and that's why we planted what we did, was cover crops, and we're picking a high carbon plant, and then putting it through cows and getting them to trample some and give us some beef on some, but we thought that high carbon would be the quickest way to build soil, but it's not, because you don't have that green leaf, you don't have a living root. So even, in my opinion, even on crops, you need to have grass in there for a while. It needs to be in a rotation. Get the grass in there and let it do what it does. Get some livestock there. That's what it was when we got here. We broke it all up. And we've lived 100 years on it now. So if we can get that back in the system, or even a way to grow crops into sod, or I don't know how to do it, but I really feel strongly that we need to get that grass component back on. We're seeing more and more farm ground further and further west, it seems like. You can see soybeans in scenic South Dakota until the last few years. So it's just super important, especially with our rainfall. Keep it covered up, keep the living root if you can. Livestock to me are the key. Ours is probably, rapid is 18, but the Dakota triangle is like 12 to 14 probably, I would say. We have Thompson Butte that sits out there that somehow the rain goes around that butte. I don't know how it does it, but we don't get up much. So it's nice to have those other places that catch rain, but we don't. Yeah. Jeremy, you got questions, I'm sure.
Always, but.
Yeah, basically my garden.
I'm curious about how your forest services, like, working with larger federal lands, is there a push to work on soil health within those
It
agencies?
depends on who's in the administration at the time, it seems like. So you might build a good relationship with one guy, and you're talking about maybe some rotation of grazing on them. So ours is in Buffalo Gap National Grasslands. It goes through the Forest Service, but so you might build a relationship there where he's willing to let you do some rotation of grazing and set up a bunch of fence and that, and then the next guy like that. It's not really. And we run in common with a neighbor, so he's out there with us all the time. I checked into these collars. They have the virtual fence collars you can get on cows now. I had a guy call me the other day from there's one company called Vince, and then there's one company called Corral. Corral are pretty cool because they have those solar panels on them, so you don't have to change batteries. They last for 2 years, I think they figured. But to me, you can get a mob of cows with a bunch of collars on, you can change the world in a hurry. Because now we're able to move those cattle all the time and let ground rest behind them. That would be a game changer. We talk about sequestering carbon, that would be a huge deal. And, you know, it's the same with bison. It's just, we don't have the bison yet. And we don't have that many, but we can do it with cows. The same with the bison, the same as, I don't know if we get colors on pigs, I don't know what they would do.
Gotta do the chin.
Yeah, they don't like that string, so you can teach them pretty fast.
He's not in this room, but Dave Hull also is a technician for the Soil Health Coalition, ranches there by Newell, and has got some callers on the way. He actually thought they might be showing up today for sheep.
Sheep?
Yeah, sheep. And the technology is rapidly changing. SDSU at Cottonwood has research ongoing with the Benz company, in addition to some private ranches. So that technology probably will get more commonplace and more affordable in the coming years.
Is that what you ordered from that?
Yeah,
Fence.
thanks. Yeah. And it's, like I said, it's hopefully we can get it, you know, it used to be a bag phone, now we've got a computer in our hand. So hopefully we can get this, 'cause it will be a game changer. There's gonna be some that won't want to adopt it, because they're pretty sure that we're gonna get spied on, or somebody else can control our cattle or something. Short-term game is, it's gonna be a big deal, and change the landscape.
On grade, what's their mothering ability? We've seen that, right?
On Murray Grace?
No.
So, what we bought, there were two bred for bull calves, and both of those are calves. Calves are exploding. Pretty impressed with the calves so far. They're supposed to be great mothers. I did read one article said they weren't good to be around for the first 3 or 4 days after the calf, but everybody else says they're not solid, they can do whatever. So, I don't know. It's just, you know, you have different levels of stockmanship. People that you kind of, you know, but so far, they're super docile. We bought 2 cows and a bull, and the bull right away. I needed them in the crop for a little while so I could move some other stuff around, but figured out you could scratch him all over and feed him under your hand. Pretty soon I had kids sitting on him, and it's pretty cool to have that around, especially if you're thinking tourists and people that don't know animals and livestock, you can order that. Because even if they're not hurting somebody, if I get somebody to come out and pick it, 10 people will come out and watch me move cattle, and they'll pick their head up and move to the other side of the pasture, the paddock, then that doesn't really help. If they're used to people, and I'm always intrigued by genetics. So when we first moved out there, we did a lot of AI all of our cows and all our heifers, and we studied these genetics, bulls and cow lines. Then we kind of go down this regenerative path to realize that Mother Nature does a way better job than selecting than anything that I can do. So we kind of got away from it. We just use bulls. But now I've got these Murray Grays again, and I'm studying. I find myself studying genetics and trying to figure out. I want the purest bloodline I can get. I started in Australia, so we're looking in Australia for blood to kind of get a know on that. It's I'm excited about them. If I haven't had them very long, and I think I would switch. I haven't seen them in the summer. They do fine in the winter. A lot of people say, well, they're more heat tolerant, but about the winter, they're so far fine. I don't see them behind the windbreak once when I need it out doing everything the black cattle are doing. Research I found on the heat tolerant, they were 9 degrees cooler than the black one. Right next to them, 9 degrees cooler on a hot day, and they were gaining another half a pound a day. So that's a big deal. If you have a couple hundred of those, that adds up in a hurry. So I've only had one Murray Grey steak so far, but yeah, it's interesting. There's not very many breeders, and they're not really willing to give up their genetics either. They have a little bit of here or there. So I'd like to get a good relationship with that source.
You said there was some Scottish breed there?
There's Aberdeen Angus. Yep. So if you think about Aberdeen Angus or smaller framed Angus, they usually generally grow just as much meat, so
most part, that they're smaller, more efficient, and they take as much feed. I really like their average bull, because call them the bull, it was awesome.
Aberdeen, where they had original genetics brought over.
Yeah, before we started kind of making them, trying to make them bigger. And some of the breeders have done that with Murray Grays. I found some that are 8-frame bulls already that defeat the purpose, that especially out here, we're looking for a real efficient type cow. And with us, like we said, our stocking rates, we want them to graze year round. You can't do that with an 8-frame cow. They just won't do it. You need something else. It's indeed some kind of a lot of stuff there. We're talking livestock and cover crops and stuff, and I know that we've probably some good questions. Catch up with me or whatever, feel free to ask. Yep, those are an awesome resource, so yeah, I try to get a hand on those every year. Pass those around.
You have some.
Yep, I've got some.
Tim, do you want to briefly say what that book is?
Thanks for coming, you guys.